Welcome to Lola's Frugal Life Podcast. If you're on a mission to be more frugal with both your time and money, you're in the right place. In this podcast, we talk about topics that help enhance living a frugal lifestyle. The goal is to save time and money where we can so that we can use the rest on what matters most to us. We talk a lot about both time and money management so that we can waste as little as possible on both. We do this while also embracing a progress over perfection mindset. If that sounds good to you, then please stick around for the latest episode right after a few quick words from our sponsor. Hi everyone, welcome back to Lola's Frugal Life Podcast. Today, I wanted to talk about ways to do freezer meal or freezer cooking, sort of doing freezer cooking, not like fully doing freezer cooking, which is sometimes talked about as once a month cooking, where you do like these big meal prep days and get food packed in the freezer so that you can basically eat for a month out of the freezer without having to cook each night. I did do some of that at a point in the past. So at one point when my kids were really young, I got kind of really overwhelmed with keeping up with everything because I had three fairly young kids together, like kind of within a somewhat short-ish period of time, kind of like a normal period of time, but still kind of young. My first two were 2 years and 2 months apart, and then my second and third were 2 years and I think 10 months apart. So I had, generally three small kids for a period of time, and I work full time, and it just was crazy at the time, as I'm sure some of you are probably going through right now. So at one point I started doing, they had like a place, and I don't know if they still have these. I'm guessing they do, but I'm not sure. They had a place where you could actually purchase meal kits, like where they basically put the meal kit together for you, and you could choose like say 5 or 6 different meals, and you would go and pick it up, and it would be like a freezer bag, and inside it would have like the chicken and the seasonings, and I guess it's probably just like those meal delivery services. What am I talking about? Of course they have those. I've never actually used one of those meal delivery services, so I don't know like exactly how it comes, but as I'm speaking out loud, I'm thinking, oh right, it's probably like the same type of thing. But this was before they really had those services. So it was like a place, and you could go on their website and it would show you the meals they had available for the week. And I would order some of the meals, and it would, like I said, it would come in a kit. It would have the instructions. It would have like the prepared chicken and the seasonings and whatever the sides were and all that all in one thing. And it made it so much easier for me to manage getting dinner done. So I really loved that for a while. And then I started realizing how much it was costing me to do that. This was way back before frugality was even a thing for me. We just like kind of spent money, not crazy, but like, I don't know, we didn't have the best like money saving skills back then. So I was doing that for a while. And then I was like, this is just too expensive. There's got to be a better way to do this. So I started getting really into like the whole once a month cooking thing, where you would prepare like several meals, and you would freeze them. Like you would do like, say like 4 lasagnas, or like, I don't know, 3 meatloafs or whatever. And you would spend like a whole day preparing food, but you would be able to kind of stock your freezer and have a bunch to feed your family over the course of the next month. Even if it wasn't every single day, there wouldn't necessarily be a meal every single day. There was an abundance of meals to pull from the freezer on a busy night or whatever. And I was trying to kind of get into that and figure out like the best way to do it. It was kind of overwhelming to me to do the entire like 30-day meal prep, which I did try and do once, where I took like a whole day and kind of followed a plan and cooked all these meals. Then what I started trying to do was where I would just do like, say like 4 batches of a meal and freeze it. So say on a Saturday, I would decide, okay, I'm going to make meatloaf, and I'm going to make like 5 of them, and I'm going to maybe make one tonight and freeze 4. So even though I didn't get like a month's worth of meals, I got 4 meatloaves in the freezer, and then maybe the next weekend I would make something else. So I would kind of accumulate stuff in the freezer that I could cook from. So that worked well for a while until my kids started to get a little bit older. And then that was the time when they started getting into activities, and we had things at night and things on the weekend and friends and just so much going on that then I felt like overwhelmed by the idea of doing any meal prep. So I kind of got off the meal prep for a while as far as like the freezer meal planning and all that type of stuff. And honestly, right now, I don't do any of that. I don't do any freezer. I don't make anything specifically for the freezer. I will definitely freeze things when I have leftovers, but I don't usually typically purposefully make extra stuff at this point in my life. I definitely do want to get back to it right now. It's just not something I'm in the habit of right now, and my current meal planning is working for me. But what I did want to do today, now that I kind of talked forever about just randomness, I wanted to talk though about a period of time where I was doing freezer meal prep, but it wasn't like meal prep. So it's kind of like things I did to make meal prep easier, but I wouldn't call it fully prepping meals. So what I mean by that is I would do things like if I knew I was going to be making chicken nuggets like for dinner one night, I would, when I got the fresh chicken, when I brought it home before I froze it, I would take the time to cut it up into small pieces. And then I would freeze it just like that. So I'd cut it up into the chicken nuggets and freeze it. And while that doesn't seem like a lot, I had the time when I did it. I don't remember how I had the time when I did it, because now when I go grocery shopping, I'm like, I come home, it's late. I must have been doing it on the weekends or whatever, but whatever I was doing, I had time to prep some things when I bought the groceries before I put them in the freezer. Maybe I put it in the fridge and did it the next day. I don't remember what I did. But I would do things like that. I would cut up chicken for chicken nuggets so that on a busy night when I came home and I was making the chicken nuggets, I would defrost that specific bag of chicken. I would like mark it with a marker to say it was chicken, cut for chicken nuggets. And then it would already be cut up for me. So then I could just quickly bread it, pop it in the oven, and that would get going. I would do things like if it was in the summer, I would take chicken breast and I would cut it, like slice it into like fillets, and then I would marinate it. I would put the marinade in the bag and freeze it that way. That way on the day I took it out, it would marinate in the bag, and then I could just throw it on the grill. I would do the same thing with steak. I would I'd put steak in a bag, put the marinade in, and then that way when I took it out and it was defrosting, it would automatically marinate, and then I could just throw it on the grill. So I did a lot of kind of like prep, but I wouldn't call it like freezer meals, but it was anything I could do to make the prep on the night a little bit easier, to get dinner ready when it was like time to cook. Then I did do some kind of full meal prep, but they weren't like big meals. They were really, really easy stuff, like taco meat. Sometimes I would make like a double batch of taco meat and I would freeze it into portions. And then that way, if we wanted to have tacos one night, I could literally just grab a bag of already made taco meat, heat it up, take out some taco shells, chop up some lettuce, tomato, whatever we're going to put on them, and have a really quick meal. I also used to love making meatloaves ahead of time, and I really should start doing this because it was so helpful. And what I did with that is I didn't cook the meatloaf, but I would make the meatloaf mixture like all the way up until the point where you were going to make it. And I would put it in a Ziploc bag and flatten it and freeze it that way. That way it would store really easily in the freezer. And then the night we were going to have meatloaf, I would just take that bag out, let it defrost, push it into a loaf pan, and then bake it. And we would have meatloaf. I also used to do meatballs. So again, that is like a meal, but it was just kind of like something that was really quick and easy. I could make like a big batch of meatballs and freeze them in portions. I would also do like a huge batch of sauce and freeze that. I would also do some of the like crock pot meals where you put everything in a bag. And again, it's not like cooked. It's more just kind of putting things together. Like I have one recipe that's like sweet potatoes. I forget what it is. It's like sweet potatoes, green beans, and chicken. And basically what you do is you just put chicken, green beans, and sweet potatoes in a Ziploc bag and freeze it. And then that way the day you're going to make that crock pot meal, you literally just take that out of the freezer, dump it in the crock pot, and then add whatever, I think maybe it had some seasonings or whatever that you added to the crock pot. So things like that, just trying to think, like, is there anything that you can do before you put that food in the freezer that can help you be a little bit more prepared for the meal you're going to make, or to make that meal prep a little bit quicker. Those things can be really helpful, even if you don't have the time or don't currently desire to take the time to do meal prep ahead of time. It's kind of like you're still using your freezer to help you plan meals and to be prepared. You're just not getting full meals prepared. And then, of course, also taking advantage of meals that you do cook to actually create freezer meals, but not necessarily intentionally. But like I said, if you have leftovers, like some of our favorites that we use for future meals that we don't even intend to at the time, it just a lot of time works out that way. Things like pulled pork. Like sometimes when I make pulled pork, it all gets eaten. Sometimes it doesn't. And if it doesn't all get eaten, I'll freeze it. It can either be a lunch if it's just a small portion and maybe it's only going to feed a couple people. It could be a dinner. Same thing with like French dip. I like to make French dip. Sometimes it all gets eaten, sometimes it doesn't. But things like that freeze really well. And if you take the time to freeze it and make sure to remember to use it so it doesn't just sit in the freezer and go bad, those things can make for easy meal preps on future nights when you are really busy. So even though you might not intentionally be meal planning in advance, when the opportunities arise, try and take advantage of those. Another thing is like chili, cornbread. I had made this big tray of homemade cornbread a while ago. I don't know, maybe like a month or so ago. And I had it in the fridge, and it was like a big tray of it, like this big like 9 by 13 inch dish. And I noticed that there was no way it was going to finish it just wasn't going to get eaten in time. And I was kind of thinking, like, what should I do with this? And I wound up freezing it actually in 2 sections. There was about half of the 9 by 13 dish left, but I knew that if I froze it in that whole big chunk, like the half of the 9 by 13 dish, it was still going to be too much that my family probably wouldn't eat in like one sitting. So I decided to cut that portion into 2 portions and freeze it, and it was actually really good. Like we had hot dogs and chili the other night, and I was just like, oh, let me just take that out, and I just like defrosted it and put it on the side. It just was like an extra side dish to go with our dinner. And I did that another time too. I forget what I had made, something else with the cornbread. I was like, oh, this would go good with it, and I took it out and just defrosted it. So the food didn't go to waste, and it helped me add like another little side dish just by kind of thinking ahead and making sure to freeze the food rather than letting it go bad. I'm trying to think like if there's anything else that I do that with often. And the thing is too, always when you are purchasing food to freeze, even if it's not, like I said, for specific meal prep, always be careful about how you package or how you freeze the portions. This is with leftovers or when you're purchasing like fresh meat that you're going to freeze for later. It can be so tempting sometimes to just throw stuff into the freezer. But if you don't take the time to divide it up into portions that you're going to use, it makes it really difficult to use it. And especially if it's leftovers, you're probably going to wind up wasting some of it. Because if you freeze this like huge portion of leftovers that will never get eaten in one sitting, you're either not going to take it out of the freezer because you know it's going to be too much, so you'll be tempted to just leave it there. Or if you do take it out, you're not going to wind up eating it all, and then some of it's going to wind up getting thrown out. So just taking that time up front to divide out your ingredients into portions, whether that's ingredients like fresh ingredients or whether that's leftover meals, just kind of making sure you take the time to portion those out properly before you put them in the freezer. And also make sure you have your freezer organized in a way where you can find what you have in there. One tip I have, because my freezer used to be a total nightmare. I have a chest freezer in my basement where I keep a lot of, mostly like all the meats and stuff. And then if I'm freezing anything for later, I'll always put that in there. So it used to be a complete nightmare. I could never tell what was in there. Everything was just randomly all over the place because there was no real way to contain anything. And one day I looked for tips online on how to kind of organize your chest freezer. And I found this great tip of using grocery bags, like the what do you call it? Like the canvas grocery bags. So, and this was years ago, but I saw this tip, and ever since I started doing that, I always know what's in my freezer. I have several of the canvas bags, and I put everything in categories like together. Like I have like one canvas bag that's like chicken breast. I have one canvas bag that's like ground beef. I have one canvas bag that's just like random frozen stuff. Like, I don't know, like appetizers for New Year's Eve or whatever, just kind of like frozen things that you buy, like pizza rolls or whatever, things like that. And then I have another one that might be like pork chops or things like that, whatever. But the thing is that because they're in the canvas bags and all like items are together, it's easy to see what I have, so I'm not buying things that I already have, and things aren't going to waste because I see what I have. It's not getting like trapped down at the bottom of the freezer, and I can pull out each bag and move them. Like I literally just, when I need to get down to the third bag below, I literally just lift the other two bags out, put them on the floor for a second, get what I need, and then put them back in. So it's easy to access everything. It's really helpful. So if that's somewhere that you're struggling with keeping the food in the freezer organized, maybe look and see, depending on the type of freezer that you're trying to organize, what ways you can make that, improve on that, because that can really help make sure you're using your freezer properly and being able to use up what you have. So anyway, I'm kind of going in all different directions here, but basically what I wanted to do is just say, meal prepping, a lot of people really go all in and do full freezer meal prep where they do have like fully prepared meals, a lot of like casserole type dishes, crock pot meals, instant pot meals, where you can be prepared. You spend like a day or two and you just go crazy and cook, and then you have stuff for a month. And I love the idea of that. I really do. I just haven't gotten to a point in my life right now where I have the time built into my schedule to do that. So I just kind of wanted to encourage you that even if you love the idea of that, but that's not something that works for you right now, just try and think of what things you can do to be a little bit more prepared, or to do a little bit of prep before you freeze things, to make sure that they're as easy to use as possible and as prepared as possible before you put them in the freezer. Make sure you're saving things that can be future meals, and making sure that you save them in portions that will actually be eaten by your family. So that's it for today. I hope this episode was helpful. I really appreciate a recent feedback that I just got left, a review on Apple iTunes. It was super, super exciting when I saw it. So I just want to say thank you so much. I was going to read it to you, but I am like, hold on, I'm fumbling to get to it because I had another podcast app up on my, not another podcast app, I had another podcast up on my screen and I couldn't see the rating, but I see it now. Okay. So actually, oh my gosh, as I went to read this to you, I got another review. So thank you so much. I got another new review. It's from BRC in Baltimore. And it says, this podcast is a pleasure to listen to. Down to earth, lots of good tips. Planning to implement Lola's tips on improving your yard frugality this spring, an area in which I often overspend. Looking forward to it. So this woman, I can tell by what she wrote, she actually went out of her way and sent me an email thanking me for this episode that I did on sprucing up your yard by like in a frugal way, with just kind of doing some cleanup and just doing some simple things that can help make your yard look nice without spending a lot of money. So I'm super thankful that she left me that review. And then the one that I was originally going to read you said, best ideas ever. And this was from Wendy's 1384-926. And she said, I'm so glad I found this. She has great practical ideas that are applicable to everyone. Definitely recommend. So these reviews, first of all, they're so nice. Like, you have no idea how excited I get when I look and I have a new review, because they're very hard to come by. And like I've said before, I totally get it. You're just listening and you move on to the next podcast and whatever. I totally get it. Honestly, I don't think I ever even left a review for another podcast until I started doing a podcast and realized how difficult the reviews were to get. So I'm only seeing that when I do get them. They are so exciting to me to see. I appreciate them so much. But even more importantly, that's what helps grow the podcast, because when the algorithm sees ratings and reviews being left, it'll start recommending it to more people. So that's why it's important to me, because I am trying really hard to grow the show, and it is very difficult because there are so many podcasts out there. It's really hard to get the podcast noticed and distributed to others. So with all that being said, if you wouldn't mind leaving a rating and review if you haven't already, I would really appreciate it. And thank you so much to those of you who just did. And that's it for today's podcast, and I will see you back here next week. So thank you for checking in for this podcast episode. And don't forget, you can always email me with any questions or suggestions at lolasfrugallife@gmail.com. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at lolasfrugallife. And you can find a blog post for most of my episodes, and definitely all of my meal plan episodes, at lolasfrugallife.com. You can also join our private listeners group at facebook.com/groups/lolasfrugallife. And if you enjoy the show, please make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen from. And I would love it if you would screenshot the show and tag me on Instagram so I could see you're listening. Also, if you can please take a couple of seconds to rate and review the podcast. Those ratings and reviews are what help the show come up better in search results so that other people can find this podcast. So that will really help me in growing my audience. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have an awesome day.